2022 is finally going to wrap up soon. It's going to end soon. And I gotta say, it's been a fantastic year for music in general. There have been so many album drops throughout the year, so many decent and great projects, some masterpieces that I would say. And yeah, overall, it's just been a very busy year for music, drop after drop after drop, artist after artist after artist, new faces, old faces returning. It's been a very interesting year. And I think in every year, there are always some albums that, while aren't necessarily the best of the best, I feel that they should definitely get a certain shout out. Typically, I include my honorable mentions in my best of series, just say it pretty quickly, but knowing the length that's going to be the best of 2022 video is freaking crazy. They have so many albums in there that to fit it all, or just like to put the honorable mentions and explain a little bit, is going to be mind numbing, and it's going to be an extremely hard video to just edit and go through, aside of the already God knows how many albums I have thrown in there. Decided to just separate this thing to make it a bit easier and just a bit faster for you guys to click on and just hear a bit more of a slightly more in-depth explanation of my placement. Just an FYI, this is unranked. I'm just going to be throwing a bunch of albums out of place. It doesn't mean that just because I said this album first doesn't mean I think it's my least favorite. I think it's the worst of this list. So I'm just saying it because it's just the first thing that popped up in my head, or the first thing I have on my list. Saba dropped a pretty decent record with a few good things, and just like the title suggests, it's honestly just a few good things. While I do think that at times this record can be a bit slow paced, a bit too slow paced, I do think it has its very ear grabbing moments, some very nice R&B from time to time, some I guess a nice traditional R&B. I'm not entirely sure how to label it, but there are some R&B elements of this record that are very nice and sometimes a bit gorgeous. And there are obviously the bangers in here that are more old school and that are kind of trap infused. Driver is Good was honestly my personal favorite song off of the record, aside of the great G Herbo verse. Just the lyricism and just the attention to detail that Saba has with his wordplay. And we just see exactly word by word what he's saying and describing in his scenery. It's something very dark, a bit twisted, but I just personally think it's just a great representation of how capable Saba can be, how diverse he is. How diverse he is as an artist. With Care For Me, his previous record, it was like an arsenal of, this is Saba, this is what I've seen, this is what I've experienced, personal stories, very traumatizing stories and all, which I was a great record. And while A Few Good Things isn't necessarily as good as that one or better, I personally think that, as I said, as the title suggests, has a few good songs in there that I think everybody should listen to. We have a collab mixtape, which is SG and 42 Dugg with The Last Ones Left. I think this is a very interesting showcase of what this duo is capable of, and I never would guess in a million years that these two would have such great chemistry. SG has been a new face a lot of people seem interested into and just want to hear more music from, and I can understand definitely why, because aside of his very interesting and great project with Bigger Than Life or Death, which is like banger after banger after banger, his charisma, his hunger, just overall his energy in general, it's just something so pleasing to just listen to and just observe in general. It's something that I think a lot of rappers lack today, especially in the trap scene, which a lot of artists, I don't want to sound like an old head, seem to be in very autopilot mode. SG seems to just be hungry and aggressive, and he seems like he wants to just absolutely murder every beat he touches on. Quelle has to be one of the most interesting abstract hip-hop artists I've heard in a while. He made it on my year-end list back in 2020 with Innocent Country 2, the collab record with Chris Keys, which I honestly thought was one of the most refreshing, just chill and just provocative records I've heard in a long time, and it still is to this day. I re-listened to it a few months ago. Here with Deathfame, I honestly think it's a very intriguing and interesting concept, and I think it's executed pretty well and pretty decent. I think the reason why this landed, I don't want to say low, I'm putting low in quotation marks here, because I think it's a pretty good record with, as I said, an interesting concept. It's mostly because there are some tracks in here that get a bit loose in the mix, and they don't stick out as hard as they want to stick out, and there's some tracks in here that I felt like could have used a bit more of the oomph that Quelle typically delivers. Alive Isn't Always Living is honestly one of the deepest and darkest tracks I've heard this year alone. And it's one of the most emotional tracks and most emotional and vulnerable tracks that I've heard overall as well. It just made me feel like so, I don't know, just like in a different mental space. I guess the vintage instrumental that plays with the detuned chords, detuned piano progression, that sounds something straight out of like a abandoned 50s, 60s type of track. I don't know why I'm saying that. But yeah, and just the lyrics of death over just the lyrics of death, life, and spirituality, and how he's just surviving and not really living is honestly just it just hit me so hard. And I'm not even gonna lie, I can't even lie, I kind of cried a bit in that song because it was something spiritually that just hit me personally, and it's a huge relatable thing. And man, it's a very very deep track. The concept of Deathfame obviously attributing to artists like Juice World, or just people that artists that we've lost that have now suddenly have a huge rise and impact and popularity, like MF Doom for instance, or these artists or rappers that have died and just have had a huge surge in the fan base. It's a very interesting question. I'm glad that someone has addressed it, or idea that someone has addressed it with the idea and question of, do we need to die in order to be as successful as we want to be? Is it really our ticket to fame? Do we need to die in order to get the recognition we deserve? It's honestly something very messed up. It's honestly something very messed up. The society thing, it's honestly a very messed up. I mean, years of working, years of grinding to just get noticed when you pass away. While sure your legacy carries on, it's kind of sad to not live enough to see yourself become a GOAT. I guess I want to say. Maybe it wasn't that deep of a concept, but personally, that's how I kind of interpreted it and how it kind of sounds in my ears when listening to the record. As I said, it's sort of a deep and thoughtful, provocative mental picture or mental thing that I just digested. I honestly think overall there are some very cool and chill tracks in here. There are just bars and bars and bars. Quelle Chris is known for having one of the best pens in abstract hip hop, and he still just showcases it in this record. Next up, we have Ramona Park Broke My Heart by Vince Staples. It's honestly great that I'm talking about this record right now, especially since I'm sort of listening and I'm diving a bit deeper in Vince's catalog, hearing Big Fish Theory and hearing FM, just these fantastic projects of his that I just made me respect him even more as an artist. Honestly, I think this record is solid and decent. While it didn't strike me as much as the self-titled record, especially since the length honestly is drastically different. This one is, I guess, it's a more full-length project in its totality, but overall, I mean, there are some very low-key chill songs, just like we get in the self-titled record. With DJ Mustard, just give me the vibe and impression of a old school Vince Staples with a just West Coast type bass, something that is more reminiscent of FM type track. I guess being a bit more low key and not as aggressive and party like as it was in that record, but it's very chill, very low key, and I'm pretty sure everyone has heard it at this point. And it's a banger, and it's possibly my favorite track off of this album. The hooks in here, I think, sometimes feel a bit rough. I don't want to throw anybody off. Vince is a great artist. Definitely check out this album. But sometimes the hooks feel a little bit like autopilot and they don't really expand. But there are some drastic exceptions, especially with A Free the Homies. This track with some very nice guitar chords that are throwing in the background, giving you this very beachy, summery vibe. I mean, the intro alone, I think, is called The Beach, if I'm not mistaken. And it just sucks you into this very chill album that you're going to listen to throughout. But yes, I have to admit, the second half of this record kind of feels a bit redundant, especially how there are some songs that are unpolished and unfinished and just feel like throwaway tracks here and there. But overall, this is a solid listen. We have Killing Nothing by Boldy James and Real Batman. Great duo overall. I really was impressed by their last release, I think back in 2020 or early 2021, which had some solid and some banger tracks. Over here, they're delivering the typical drug type bangers with some great samples and some great beats and some dope bars by Boldy James. So honestly, I think, I'm gonna say it, Boldy James is kind of an underrated lyricist. Sure, he'd be saying the same stuff on every record he'd be dropping, or just any feature he's been rapping on. But come on, you gotta give credit to the guy. He's been dropping some great bars, despite them being the same out of pocket. And speaking about great lyricists, we have Lupe, Fiasco, drill music, and Zion delivers once again with some very nice jazzy undertones in here. Some great bars left and right overall. Some great punchlines, double entendres. And it seems like there's more of a concept carrying around here. It's focusing more on the brutalization, I think, about drill music in general, street life, stuff like that, I guess you could say. It sounds very generalized. I don't want to make it seem that way. but there is a concept attached to here that fully analyzed or understood yet. That's what I sort of grasp from, especially the whole metaphor of being trapped in here like it was a jungle. It's our interludes, there are these spoken words, these spoken word tracks explaining this concept or narrative. But overall, we're just hearing Lupe Fiasco just give us some fantastic, great bars left and right, as I said, here and there. And the first half is like very weird because it's like he's sort of like edging you here. That sounds crazy when I just said edging, but what I'm trying to say is that he's sort of pump faking you with like these trap instrumentals playing in the background, which he does deliver pretty well. Then some slight old school hip hop in there, but the second half is honestly much smoother and much better in my opinion, because as I said, it has some jazz undertones. It works and blends itself very nicely together. It feels just natural, and he feels more in his comfort zone, and he just destroys a lot of these songs in the second half. Adding more to the fire of dope lyricism. I know I'm probably mentioned like 4 records or 3 of dope lyricism in general, but yeah, we have Nas with King Disease 3. This is more of a recent record that came out last month, if I'm not mistaken. And just like the other 2 King Diseases in the Magic EP that he released earlier last year, it's basically the same thing. Nas being Nas, throwing some great bars in here, despite some eye-rolling bars like the Black Panther 2 bar that feels out of place, especially with the track and what he's trying to say. But yeah, honestly, I thought it was a cool album. I thought it was a cool and decent project. I think it runs a bit too long, in my opinion, personally. There's some tracks in here that could have been removed, and I guess could have made it a bit slimmer, a bit more trimmer, and just easier to consume. There's a conclusion of the King Disease trilogy. Maybe I might be wrong, but overall, it's impressive seeing Nas just being at this age and just alive, kicking it. I think he's in his 40s, and he's still rapping this great over these instrumentals. As I said earlier, the other King Disease records are honestly decent, and they're not bad. I guess the reason why they never landed so high on my list in the best of, or just ended up on my best of list, is mainly because I don't necessarily replay them a lot. I mean, there are some dope songs in here, especially in King Disease 2, which we have EPMD and the Lauryn Hill track that I thought was very impressive lyrically. There wasn't that much for me to just stay there, but I guess thinking more about it, you know, there's, I guess, more for me to appreciate with King Disease 3. Aside of it not feeling like I think it's one of the absolute best records of the year, it's still an honorable and decent album overall. Next up, we have Imposter Syndrome by A.G. Club. It's a very dank title when I'm just saying that out loud. But yeah, Fuck Your Expectations Part 1 was one of my favorite albums of the year, back in 2021. It has so much energy going on, it has so many elements, genres, everything combined, and a huge trance. Just remembering my favorite Brockhampton moments with the Saturation trilogy, or what they have done with their catalog entirely. It's just so great to just see that, but inspire the new youth. But anyway, going back to Imposter Syndrome, it's basically more of the same, but just, I guess, a bit more full in terms of its development overall. It's not really a mixtape, it's more of a full studio album, being, I think, 14 or 15 tracks long and more in depth. There are some more lengthier tracks in here, some cypher type tracks that I thought were pretty cool, and just overall the ambition, the concept, the idea, I thought was executed pretty decently in here, despite a few mishaps here and there. There are some production choices that didn't go as hard as a previous record, and there are some beats that I think could have used some better mixing, maybe some punchier kicks, some punchier 808s in here. There's some slight distortion in here that can be a bit annoying at times. But overall, I think what really ties in together in this album is just the collaboration and the team effort that this group has overall. For my final honorable mention that I want to put in here, I want to give a shout out to EA and Monster, the mixtape by Young Nudy. Young Nudy has been around for God knows how long. He's been making banger after banger, especially now since having so much more mainstream notoriety with collabing with his cousin 21 Savage, and just being more out there in the trap scene, and just evolving from the underground trap scene to a more mainstream audience in general, which I think is a pretty cool vibe. It's overall pretty solid. It has some very notable highlights, especially Impala. Those grooviest tracks I've heard in a while. I know I'm saying groovy, and it's very odd, especially for a trap instrumental, but the bass line is just duddy, very like sticky, if that makes any sense. It has a pretty decent mixing as well. feels like kind of like euphoric in a way, especially with the melody that just switches up from time to time in the track. But yeah, overall in this album, overall in this mixtape, we have some great highlights here and there. While there are some slumps and some roadblocks in this progression, there are some very notable songs in here that just hit very, very hard, as I said, with Impala. And also My Gang, that despite its short, brief 2 minute length, it's a very just dreamy and just creamy. It's a very dreamy, euphoric type of song that just has you levitating overall. It's very soft, it's very light on the ears, and just, I think, Nudy singing and Nudy's bars in here are just great overall in the song. So that was all the records I think that I personally consider as honorable mentions that, well, were in the best of the best. 100% definitely deserve a shout out, and you should definitely consume it and listen to it. And there are some albums that I didn't get to listen to most likely, so I'm gonna keep updating this list as much as I can, especially since this record is being posted on a very early date, earlier than what I would typically post on a regular. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this video. Let me know what your albums that you would consider that, while weren't the best of the best, were decent enough to be an honorable mentions list. Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like as well. Subscribe, turn notification bell on so you don't miss an upload from me. And yeah, stay safe and cool, everybody. Peace out, and check these albums out.